to be proud of. What I will actually cover today is going to help improve your well-being, your efficiency, your productivity, your effectiveness, both personal and business. And finally, the most important thing is it'll help you reduce stress. Everything I'm going to take you through is based on personal experience. So what I'm going to take you through is tried and tested, and I have been the guinea pig in this whole process. Let me take you back around. I was burnt out. I was working 12 to 13 hours a day. And my manager was just loading me up with work nonstop. And at this stage, you're probably thinking, this manager you have is pretty unreasonable. But the fact of the matter is, it was my fault. And why was it my fault? It was my fault because I just could not say no. And I couldn't say no because I felt that if I said no, I would be seen as not good enough. And somehow I would have dropped in terms of value as far as my manager was concerned. The second thing that was really critical is that I have always been empowered by really good beliefs that have really helped me in really, really tough times. So the belief I had at this stage is that there is always a way if you look hard enough. But unfortunately, in this case, this belief was actually dragging me down. And I'll explain why. I just felt I had to do everything. I was in back-to-back meetings. I was extremely busy. And I was burnt out to the point of when I used to go to work, I used to feel physically sick. And the fact is, it was really not my manager's fault. It was my fault. And the reason being, the manager had no way of actually knowing exactly why I was busy and exactly what I had on my plate. And I'll explain how I resolved this issue a bit later on. If you felt like this at any stage, you'll know exactly what I went through. But I'm going to take you through how I went past this a little bit later on in the actual presentation. There is a real culture of busy now, and I see it all the time. When you actually go to people and you say, how are you? Invariably, people make a bit of a sad, tired face, and then they say, oh, extremely busy. I'm really tired, right? And they say it with a sense of tiredness, but also with a sense of pride. It's like I've achieved something really, really good. I'm busy, obviously, so I must be important. There was a time in the past when I would email people and they would respond either on that day or they would respond the next day or maybe 2 days later. Now, sometimes when I send people an email, they don't respond for a week. Sometimes they don't respond for 2 weeks, and in some cases, they don't respond at all. And the real question to ask yourself in this situation is, how does the person feel? The person that is actually sending you the email, how do they feel that they've sent you something which they thought was important and you have not bothered to respond, or if you have responded, you've taken ages to actually respond. Now, in your mind, you're probably thinking, yeah, but I'm extremely busy. But it's important to think about exactly how the other person feels as well. When you look at meetings, people are constantly in back-to-back meetings. And let me tell you my own story, because the fact of the matter is, it's not like people do this deliberately, they're just not fully aware. So there was a time in my life when I was extremely busy and I was in back-to-back meetings, and many people on this call will actually relate to this. So what used to happen is, I used to show up late for meetings because I'd just come from another meeting, and then I would leave the meeting early to try and make it in time for my next meeting. In this particular case, there was a meeting with around 12 people. We were doing a major advertising campaign. So there were external people there from the advertising agency, there were internal people, there were senior executives. And just as I was doing a lot, I showed up late, right? And when I showed up late, I noticed that my GM at the time looked kind of a little bit upset, but I couldn't understand why. I went for the meeting, I finished the meeting, and as usual, I left early. Now, when I left that meeting early and I went back to my desk, after a while, the GM's kind of personal assistant summoned me and said she wanted to talk to me. And I went into her office and there were bad signs. The bad signs were her bottom lip was kind of quivering a bit. And when her bottom lip was quivering, it meant that you were in trouble. So she started off with, I'm really, really upset with you, Chris. And I was thinking to myself, what have I done lately? I couldn't think of anything I had clue as to what I had done wrong. So I said to her very innocently, I'm sorry, what have I done? And she said to me, you mean to say you don't know? And I said, no, I have no idea. And she said, there were 12 people waiting for you for that meeting. You showed up 10 minutes late, and then you left early. What that is saying to them is that you don't respect the people in the meeting and you don't respect their time. And I said, oh, I didn't mean to cause them any disrespect. So I said, I really didn't mean to upset them. So she then said to me, you mean to say you had no idea? And I said, I had no idea that I was upsetting them, because honestly, if I thought I was upsetting them, I wouldn't actually do that. And she said to me, you have to respect people's time. If you show up late for a meeting, the decent thing is to at least tell people in kind of advance that you're showing up late, but you have to respect times. It's highly disrespectful. And I remember that. And to this day, whenever I'm going to be late for a meeting, I make sure people know, and I try really, really hard to show up in time for meetings. So in the same way, if you're busy, you honestly think you have the right sometimes to be rude to other people. It's just because you haven't thought things through. So let me take you back to my burnt out episode. So like I said, I couldn't say no. I was always trying to do things. I felt like if I wasn't doing enough, I was kind of letting my manager down. I had around 12 things on the go. So whenever I face issues like this, I typically go to people with more experience. So I went to my friend Ray and I said, look, this is a story. I've got 10, 12 things on the go. I'm working 12 to 14 hours a day. I'm working on the weekends as well. It's really stressful and I don't know exactly what to do. And what Ray said to me next felt like an absolute punch in the stomach. And let me explain what he said. And chances are some of you who are busy and are going through the same challenges will feel exactly the same. The first thing he said to me is, he says, if you reach this stage, it means that you don't know how to say no. You are inefficient in terms of how you do your stuff. You do not delegate, and you're not good at prioritizing your work. And I felt really, really sick in my stomach when he said that, but he softened the blow. And he said, I've got a strategy for you. This is what I want you to do. He said, go to your manager. And when you go to him, explain to him that you've got 12 projects on the go, that you have only X amount of time in terms of hours, and you can only do, so many projects, and, ask him for help to prioritize what you should focus on first, second, and third. Now, before I did this, I was really nervous because, again, those fears came up. He's going to think I can't finish my job, I can't do what he's given me to do, et cetera, et cetera. But I was so pleasantly surprised because when I sat down with my manager and I went through the list of things, and he said, I had no idea you were working on so much stuff, which made me feel a little bit surprised. But the fact of the matter is he had 6 other direct reports. There was no way he can keep track of what everyone is working on. He said, okay, look, of these 12 projects, I would suggest the most important things for you to focus on are these 3. These next 3 are the things you should do next. These other 6, we can reprioritize them and you can do them later on. And I, felt a sense of relief, but I have to tell you that the stuff I could do, I could execute it well, and it was done extremely effectively. And this proven studies gone to show that if any individual or organization is focusing on, say, 10 to 12 things, they're basically unfocused. But if they focus on 3 to 4 things, they will execute those excellently. And part of my nervousness, part of my angst was very much around the fact that Even if I finished all these 12 jobs, I wouldn't be able to do a good job. So this really, really helped me. And it really made me think. At the end of the day, the one thing that, if you look at people, they have varying degrees of health, of wealth, of education, of even opportunities. But the one thing everyone has in exactly the same proportion is time. And it made me think about how I need to manage my time better. And that is when I had a bit of an episode. And I'll explain this to you. I was in a meeting with a client, and we were sitting around a table, and suddenly in the middle of the meeting, I started feeling a bit faint and giddy. The whole room was spinning in front of me, and I just sat down there, and for at least 5 minutes, I couldn't really converse properly. And I thought I better get this checked, because the last time I had felt this way was when I was 12 years old, when I hadn't had my breakfast and my lunch, and I fainted in school. So I went to the doctor, and I got myself checked out, and he checked my blood pressure, and my blood pressure was sitting at 155 over 110. And he said, "You've got high blood pressure." Now, as funny as this sounds, things like blood pressure are things that we, at that age at least, I thought happened to other people and didn't really happen to me. So I literally went to the doctor and I said, "What is this blood pressure?" And he explained to me that, when your arteries and your veins get clogged, they get clogged to the point where, and he showed it to me like a balloon, they get clogged, and then once they get clogged, they could explode. And once they exploded, you could end up getting a stroke, or you could end up getting a heart attack, right? And it really frightened me, because for the first time I was faced with something that was potentially life-threatening. And I started seriously thinking about how I could manage this for myself. And then I came across this quote from Eisenhower. Eisenhower was an ex-president of the United States. He was also the chief commander of the Allied forces during World War II. And his quote read, "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." And I did some more research on Eisenhower, and I came across the Eisenhower Matrix, which I have used ever since. Let me just share my screen and share this matrix with you. So if you look at the matrix, you have two axes. On the one axis, you have something, a task or an initiative is not important. And on the other axis, you have the task is important. On the next axis, you have something that is either urgent or not urgent. And in each of these quadrants, there are some squares. And let me talk you through each of these squares so you fully understand how this can really help you in terms of increasing your effectiveness and your efficiency. In the first quadrant here, you have something that is important, but also urgent. This is fundamentally your day job. So this is what you have to do, achieve your sales targets, prepare your reports, prepare your board reports, et cetera, et cetera. At a personal level, it is things like paying your electricity bill, paying the school fees, dropping your kids to school. It's necessary. It is your day job. It is something that is both urgent and important. It's something you have to do. If you look at the bottom quadrant, so something that is not important and not urgent, you have things like that are a complete waste of time. In an organizational context, is things like gossiping or bitching about other people. In a personal sense, it is things like surfing on the internet. Nothing wrong with surfing on the internet if you're looking for something, but if you're just surfing on the internet aimlessly, then it's a waste of time. In the same way, it could be something like surfing television channels. Nothing wrong with watching TV, but if you're just shifting through television channels aimlessly, then it is surely a waste of time. The next quadrant is what I call the deceptive quadrant. So it seems urgent, but it's not really important. So an example of that is you're working on something really important, and then you hear the ding from your computer that an email is coming. And because you hear the ding from the computer that your email has come in, you feel obliged to actually open up your email. And the fact of the matter is, you don't really have to at that time. It may not be really, really critical. In the same way, I always encourage people to have red time. So red time is when you're working on something really important and you don't want to be disturbed, and you get a call and you know who it is. It might be someone you really know and it's just a social call, but you feel you have to take the call. So it's something that feels urgent, but it's not really important. And now the last quadrant is what I call the strategic quadrant. And the strategic quadrant is the most important quadrant because it is something that is important, but not urgent. And, and strategic change only happens when you actually make this quadrant a daily habit. Let me explain what I mean. Going back to my health example, where I had high blood pressure, if I had spent time in looking after my health, like my diet, if I had done meditation, if I had managed my stress levels, I would never, ever have reached the situation where I had a health issue. And when it became a health issue, suddenly it became urgent and important. In an organizational sense, if you don't spend time in the strategic quadrant, you will have more of the urgent stuff happening in your organization. So let me give you an example. Something that is urgent and causes a lot of pain is customer complaints. But if you spend time in terms of building great experiences, taking action against customer feedback, you'll get fewer complaints and you'll have fewer urgent stuff to deal with. If you spend time in terms of staff development and staff engagement, you will increase productivity by almost 100% based on our research. And the second thing that will happen is you will reduce staff attrition. You won't have staff that are leaving you all the time. If you spend time in the strategic quadrant in terms of building a competitive advantage, you will increase your consideration set when customers are making a choice between yourself and your competitor. And the chances are more of them will basically select you. And across the board, the strategic quadrant is the most important quadrant because that is where you get things done. But the big challenge with the strategic quadrant is it is something that you don't have to do straight away because it's important but not urgent. It's a bit like exercise. You can say, oh, I need to exercise, but I'll start next week or I'll start next month. This is why 95% of New Year's resolutions never ever see the light of day, because if something is really strategic and important, you should do it straight away. You shouldn't wait for New Year's Day to actually kick it off. So this quadrant is where you improve your business, you focus on innovation, et cetera, et cetera. But at a personal level, this is important as well. When I go to people and I say, what do you value the most when we do executive workshops? The first thing that always comes up is people say they value their family. And then my next question is then why do you spend so much time at work? So the strategic quadrant personally is how much time do you spend with your family? How much time do you spend with your significant other? That's not transactional, that is truly value-based, that is truly quality time. How much time do you spend with your significant other, outlining to them how important and critical they are in your life? Or do you just interact with them transactionally? But the other part that is important in the strategic quadrant is that the more senior you are, the more time you need to spend in the strategic quadrant. So to give you an example, Bill Gates, when he was interviewed once and someone asked him, where do you spend your time? He said he spends a majority of his time on two things. One is on innovation and the second is on recruitment. And that gives you an idea of what you should spend time on. Let me give you an example of how this can go very wrong. I was running an executive workshop, and I literally got each of the execs in the team to actually put down their tasks the last 2 weeks and list them in terms of how many tasks fit into each of these quadrants. And once I did this, I noticed that there was one senior director, and what she actually had was she had a lot of stuff in the urgent and important quadrant. And there was very little she was doing strategically. And when I asked her why, she said, I have to do this regulatory work, and this regulatory work takes up 40 to 50% of my time. And I asked her to explain what she does, and she explained it. So this is all stuff they had to do for the government and so on and so forth. And she went on to tell me that literally half her time is spent there. Now, this was at a director level, a very senior, very capable person doing this kind of mundane, repetitive, operational kind of work. So if you look at 250 business days, you're spending between 100 and 125 days just on regulatory type of input. So after the obvious question, I said, this is kind of a little bit beneath you, this task. You need to delegate it to someone else. If you did delegate it to someone, how long would it take you to train them so that they're fully proficient in doing what you do? And she had to think about it. And then she said, I think in around 3 weeks, I could train them, right? So 3 weeks of a relatively junior person, so 15 business days versus 100 to 125 days of an actual director. So one of the key things is the more senior you are, the more time you need to spend in the strategic quadrant. And if you're not, and if you're getting caught in day-to-day, nitty-gritty kind of work, then it really doesn't suit your position. Okay. To actually kind of end this session, the first question, I have to ask people is busy good? So a lot of people say, yeah, it's good to be busy. But my view is it's more like a bit of an addiction. People are busy, then they feel good about it because they're busy, and hence busy equates to important. But is it really good? Because a lot of research has been done to show that people produce their best work when they're actually calm and not stressed. So if you're running from meeting to meeting, if you have too much on your plate, will you be able to do something effectively? So for example, if you're focused on 12 things, will you be able to execute them well? But rather, if you just focus on 3 things and you execute them well, will the output be better for you and the organization? Is something you really need to think about. And focus is an important thing, right? I always believe in the 80-20 rule, where 20% of your tasks will give you 80% of your results. So one key piece of analysis is using that to really get a sense of, there are 12 things I have to do, but what is going to have the most impact to the organization? So to actually end, I want to take you back to my original situation where my friend Ray asked me all the tough questions, which felt like I had been punched in the gut. But this is something you need to ask yourself on a regular basis to really increase your effectiveness, your efficiency, your productivity, your relationships, whether it's business or personal. The first thing you got to ask yourself is, do I have an issue in terms of saying no? The second thing you got to ask yourself is, am I inefficient? Can I do things better and more efficiently? Am I delegating enough? Is this something that someone in my position should do, or should I train someone else so that they do it? Can I prioritize? Can I look at tasks and do I just do them because I have 12 things to do? Or can I actually prioritize them so that I know exactly what is important to me and the organization? And the last question is, am I spending enough time in the strategic quadrant? Am I spending enough time in terms of saying, how can I make the organization better? How can I make the organization more effective? And on a personal level, how can I make myself more effective? How can I make my relationships more effective? And that is the end of this live session. So I can actually take questions now. Okay. So the first question that I've got is, I like your story. I also have 10 things to do, but they're all urgent. What do I do? So again, the first thing is, what you have to remember is with your manager, I guarantee that they want you to do a good job with a few things rather than an ordinary job with 12 things. So just like I did, sit with your manager and say, I've got all these jobs to do and I have only so much time. What do you want me to focus on first, second, third? And work with them. I guarantee you it'll be a productive discussion. And your driving force that you need to communicate to them is, I really want to do a good job. And at this stage, I want to know exactly what I need to focus on so that I can do a great job. So that is that. The second question is related to the first. And the second question is, I've tried saying no to certain tasks, but I'm worried that it might impact my annual ratings for denying work, for saying I don't want to do something. So the issue is not so much what you say, but how you do it. And if you position it in a sense that says, look, I really want to do a good job, but I have too much on, help me prioritize so I can just do a few things and do them well, then I think, your manager will be quite conducive to it. But if you actually go in there and you get emotional and you say, I've got so much to do, I really can't do anything, I can't handle this, I'm too stressed. Most managers can't handle that level of, kind of emotion, and you won't get your message through. Then you'll really be conveying to them that maybe you're inadequate. But if you convey to them, you want to do a good job, and to do a good job, you need to do less and do it really effectively, then you'll get your message through. Interesting question from Anjani on LinkedIn. He says, we work long hours and it is tiring. I don't feel productive. What can we do? So in my story, when I was really, really busy, this is a really good question. I'll explain what used to happen. I used to work long hours as well. And you know what? When you work long hours, you think you will get more done, but your productivity actually drops. And one of the main reasons it drops is during the day, you actually have something to do, and then you're going to work late, right? And because you're going to work late, you slow down. In fact, you might even go and have a chat to someone knowing that you're going to work till 8 p.m. anyway, right? So when you work longer hours, it doesn't always, increase productivity. You're much better off saying you're going to work standard hours and you're going to make sure you spend quality time with your family, as an example, as a driver to make you do that. And you're much better off kind of saying, if I'm focused and not distracted, on one task at a time, this multitasking thing doesn't really work. One task at a time, you will be way, way more effective. This next question is a little bit challenging. So this is, where you're working for a client. So the question is, we work on a client project-based timeline, which leads to massive stress during project release times. What should I do? I think if I was to make this point really, really clearly, it is perfectly normal to be busy at some time, for some time. What's not good is if you're busy completely. So some of the organizations I deal with, you can sense there's a culture of busy. They're always busy. It's not just during peak times or project times. And if you're busy during a project time, that's completely normal. You need to just set time aside after the project to just rest and recuperate, and then you should be fine. But at some stage, you have to be busy. It's just a fact of life. The last question is, we get a lot of customer complaints, and this takes up a lot of our time. What should we do? Now, this is a classic case of an organization that is not spending enough time in the strategic quadrant. Because if you were spending time, you would truly understand exactly what the customer issues are. If you applied an 80-20 rule, most of the issues are about X or Y or Z. You would take time and effort to actually fix it. And once you took time to actually fix it, you would have fewer complaints. So this is a classic example of how, when you don't spend time in the strategic quadrant, you just operationally take all the customer inquiries and complaints just automatically without spending time in the strategic quadrant to look at how you can make your customer experience better, how can you make your process more efficient. this is a symptom of not spending enough time on the strategic quadrant. While if you do spend time there, you'll immediately lower the number of complaints. Okay. So this one question which came up is, I'm really afraid that if I say no to certain tasks, it'll affect my annual rating in terms of denying work. I think it's related to a previous question that I answered on this as well. And the answer to the question is simply this. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So you really need to have, what I would call a strategic conversation with your manager. Don't have an emotional conversation. Don't presume that they should know better. They should know that you're busy. They are not mind readers. So go in with the basis that they are not aware of how much you've got on your plate. Very clearly explain to them exactly what you're working on. And once you explain to them exactly what you're working on, and then explain to them, look, there's only so much time in the day. Help me understand what I should focus on first, second, third. It has to be a collaborative conversation as opposed to a conversation where you're kind of trying to blame the manager or something, or being too emotional. And once you have that kind of collaborative kind of conversation, the next thing is the few things you do, if you execute them well, people will rate you in terms of how well you execute, not so much that you did 10 things, but you did them averagely, but that you did 3 or 4 things, and you did a great job in terms of doing that. So hopefully that answers that question. Any other question? No other questions? Let's just see if there's any more questions. Okay, if there is no more questions, we will end the session. Thank you very much for attending. Remember those questions you need to ask yourself when you fall into the trap of being busy all the time. And if you have any other questions, please post them here, and I'll try and respond to them. And finally, I wrote an article about this in MoneyWise magazine. A link to that article will be available, so you can just click on the link and have a look at the entire article. All right, thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.